Hey guys, welcome back to Strategic Management Podcast. Today we're going to be discussing Porter's 5 forces. So let's get started. Porter's 5 forces are characteristics of an industry environment that have the greatest impact on the performance of the firms in that industry. The most fundamental mistake that students and many others make commonly when analyzing these forces is that they analyze them from a perspective of an individual firm. For example, they might say the bargaining power of suppliers for PepsiCo is low because PepsiCo has many options for suppliers of most of their inputs. This is incorrect. A correct version of this statement would start, the bargaining power of suppliers in soft drink industry is low because set forth. Porter's 5 forces are like weather. The weather on campus is the same for every person on campus. However, different people make different decisions to deal with the weather. Long sleeve versus short sleeve, carrying an umbrella versus wearing a raincoat, etc. In a similar way though, although Porter's 5 forces are the same for every firm in the industry, different firms make different strategic decisions to equip themselves against those forces. Some firms might source from multiple suppliers to reduce supplier bargaining power, or sign customers to exclusive long-term contracts to reduce buyer bargaining power. Performing Porter's 5 force analysis on behalf of a single firm, each force must first be analyzed from a perspective of the entire industry before any discussion or analysis is discussed concerning on how that firm is equipped to deal with that force. For example, one could say the bargaining power of buyers in the soft drink industry is fairly strong due to the purchase volume and backwards integration. However, PepsiCo's brand image and loyal customer base mitigate this power somewhat. Perform Porter's 5 force analysis, identify the most relevant factors for each force, and identify the direction and magnitude of the impact of those factors. If most of the impact indicates a strong force, identify the force as strong. If most of the impact indicates a weak force, identify the force as weak. If the main factors balance each other out, then identify the force as moderate. Here are a few force-specific notes to keep in mind. First, let's discuss threat of a new entrance. To assess the threat of a new entrance, you must identify the strengths of barriers to entry. See Chapter 2 for a representative list. If you do not discuss barriers to entry, then you are not properly assessing this threat. If you identify the threat of a new entrance as low, but there are several recent clear examples of successful entrants, you're probably doing it incorrect and need to reassess. Remember that a high barriers to entry means a low threat of new entrants and vice versa. Let's continue with supplier bargaining power. In Porter's 5 force analysis, suppliers are firms that sell inputs in industry. Suppliers do not directly sell to buyers unless suppliers are forward integrated or buyers are backwards integrated. To assess supplier bargaining power, you need to identify the most important supplier first. Then you can assess questions of relevant numbers of suppliers versus numbers of industry differentiated among suppliers. Forward integration by suppliers or backward integration by industry firms, etc. Next, let's talk about buyers' bargaining power. In Porter's 5 force analysis, buyers are direct customers that buy products or services from an industry. Buyers do not buy directly from suppliers unless suppliers are forward integrated or buyers are backwards integrated. To assess a buyer bargaining power, you need to identify the most important buyers first. The first mistake that most analysts make is only looking at consumers. Consumers are very often not the buyers that should be analyzed. For example, when the soft drink industry above, customers very rarely buy directly from soft drink manufacturers. An analysis that focused on buyer bargaining power of consumers in the industry would be extremely flawed. The second biggest mistake in analyzing this force is the overemphasis of switching costs. While switching costs is relevant, the relevant numbers of buyers compared to the numbers of firm in the industry and the volume of purchase by the average buyer are far by the most important factors in determining the buyer bargaining power. For example, in many retail industries, there are thousands or even millions of buyers, each making a relative small number of purchases each year. Retail consumers rarely have any power. Next, let's talk about the threat of substitutes. In Porter's 5 force analysis, substitutes refer to a product or service sold by firms outside of the industry that customers could choose instead of the products or services sold by the industry. Substitutes for a soft drink industry include water, coffee, or alcoholic beverages. not different options for sodas you will find at a convenience store or supermarket. Lastly, let's talk about the intensity or the threat of rivalry. In Porter's 5-force analysis, rivalry refers to the intensity with which firms need to compete with each other for customers. Most students make the mistake of claiming that each industry has a strong rivalry. This is obviously not the case, or it would be pointless to discuss the force at all. There are three main factors in determining the strength of this force. First, the number of competitors. More competitors means more stronger rivalry. The second factor is how easy or difficult it is for industry firms to differentiate themselves. More differentiation and the brand loyalty, which follows it, means lower rivalry. Third important factor is industry growth. If the industry is growing rapidly, this lowers rivalry because the firms in the industry can grow profits without taking market shares from competitors. Thank you for joining me on today's Strategic Management Podcast. I hope you learned about Porter's 5 forces. And as always, if you have any questions, just leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching.